Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. We have Dr. Bart Rademaker with us today. Dr. Rademaker has given me the authorization to call him Bart. Bart is an amazing guy. He has worked for years as a plastic surgeon. He's been nominated for a Nobel Prize. He's done work all over the world, and I'm very excited to get to know Bart and share his story with our audience. So, Dr. Rademaker, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, my name is Bart Rademaker. I am a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Been doing that for almost 28 years now. Love what I do. And I want to acknowledge you, Peter, because this show is incredible. You're a champion for us doctors. You're the voice for us and helping us understand that, yes, we're doing the right thing and letting the world know that too. So thank you for what you do, Peter.
Oh, thank you. I love hearing, you've obviously kind of known a little bit about the podcast, but I love kind of talking to and about doctors who are making, it's called Doctors Making a Difference, right? But doctors that are inspirational and are doing cool stuff. So I want to hear your story. You obviously are passionate about what you do. How did you go from being a young pre-med student to choosing this career of plastic surgery? And then, I kind of want to hear your path. How did you go through that?
Well, it's a fun story that I don't often get a chance to share, so I'm going to try to be real brief with it. But I'm originally Dutch. I grew up in 5 different countries, speak 4 languages, went to medical school when I was 17. But when we were living in Mexico, my father being an engineer, very successful businessman, he had my life pretty much planned out, but didn't know what that was going to be. And so I had to do this aptitude test when I was 13 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And the choice that I got was either be a vet or a doctor. And so I love animals, but I just didn't know how to handle them, and I wanted to talk, and so I figured I'll be a doctor. And the truth be told, Peter, it was the absolute best decision. I love what I do, and it's been a long, long journey, but definitely love what I do, and I'm very grateful that I can help so many people.
So at age 13, you had to make that choice.
Yes, sir.
So was that part of it? Was that test something that was administered by your family, or was that through the country or the school system? How did you end up taking the aptitude test at that young age?
No, that was a private test. And my brothers did it as well. And so one is another one is a doctor, another one is an engineer. And so, yeah, my father was very insistent that we were going to have professional careers, we were going to be successful. And so we had to figure out what that was early on.
Yeah, those are interesting. I remember I took one, just a sidebar. I took one of those when I was a freshman in high school, and doctor was on the list somewhere, but number 1 was funeral director. I'm like, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I don't think I could do it. I like dealing with people that are alive and having conversations with people.
Right.
And so anyway, interesting where life's path take us. So that's cool that you had that idea, that seed planted in your mind, even at that young age. Obviously you rolled with it. You went with it.
Yeah, totally. So, we moved to England, started school there, went to medical school when I was 17. I told my dad, look, I'm way too young to go to school. Can I take a year off? He said, absolutely not. You're going to medical school. So that was a total of 17 years of training, medical school with residencies. I was very fortunate to have a great training in Europe as well as here in the United States. But one thing that was really important for me, Peter, is that growing up in all these different countries, seeing all the disparities of health and wealth and lack of trust in healthcare systems and all that, and lack of access. When I was 21, I made a very conscious decision that I was going to help humanity at a global level. And what was also interesting is that by the time I completed my medical school, I realized that what medicine was teaching us was really, quite disconnected with what the communities were asking. And so that kind of started off on my journey where I'm at today.
So interesting. So even at that, again, age 21, you're 4 years already at that point into your medical education. You had an experience where you'd probably more than the average person, you'd been able to see across a whole variety of different economic realities that people live in. You decided you wanted to give back to the global community. I want to hear more about that decision. That's really interesting, because most people go on a trip to a third world country or somewhere and they see it and like, oh, that's too bad. Great. I think about them. But then after a few weeks, you're back home and you've kind of put it out of sight, out of mind. You know that it's there, but you don't think about it. So I'm interested how you actually made that decision at that young age.
Well, it was interesting because, again, very blessed life. And after I'd already made that decision and started medical school, my mother was actually involved in a very bad, car accident. And so she was actually unconscious for 6 months and in
Mm.
the hospital for about 2 years. And the fact that my father was so successful, financially successful, we were able to manage this whole failed healthcare system that we see all over the world. And I'm not knocking the healthcare system. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that we have it, but you and I know that there's some opportunities to make some
Yeah,
changes
they're all
for the better.
imperfect. Yeah.
Right. So, but the point is that very blessed. And then I was actually watching a movie called The Warriors. And this is about the gangs in New York. And I felt so bad about these poor kids, totally marginalized, totally disenfranchised. They had to make these choices for themselves to survive. And that was the pivotal point for me in recognizing, whoa, people need help. These youths need the help from people like myself who had all the things given to them. And I've got the opportunity to offer that to them as well. And so whilst I didn't exactly know what that would look like, it was a very firm decision that I wanted to be very successful so that I could do all the kind of work, help the world in every possible way. And so initially it was an idea of, well, let me be like the president of a hospital system because I was thinking in those terms then. Clearly now it's very, very different. And I'm excited to be sharing that with your audience today.
Yeah. Well, it's great because there are so many needs both here in the United States and anywhere you look. Like there are people who have tremendous access to wealth and every resource you can think of, and then there's people in the within just 50 miles or 20 miles, and they'll have such disparity, like just an incredible difference in health outcomes. And then you translate that across the world, and it's tremendous. I shared with you before we hit record, we're headed back to a place where I've volunteered for the last 10 years in Africa, and wonderful people, amazing. And the work they do is just outstanding. But it is the resources are just not even comparable. I remember one time we had raised some money from our little local community, and we left them some money behind to care for some of the people that we had found that needed surgeries and things. And I don't even think it was more than about $3,000. It wasn't very much money in terms of how much money could be raised. And they used that money for 6 months. It funded all their operations. They took care of hundreds of people with that relatively small amount of money. And in the United States, like I don't think we could keep my clinic open for even one day on that amount. By the
Right.
time you pay staffing and you have the power bill and all the different functions that go into kind of running a modern medical practice. So anyway, quite a stark difference in wealth and access to care across different spectrums, different places in the world.
And Peter, I do want to acknowledge you because you're doing one of the toughest jobs. You're doing truly doctor's work out there in rural communities. You are the pillar of every community, and certainly up to about the 1950s. We were the central part of every family, every community, and you're doing that once again, and obviously committing so much time, to other countries. I mean, that's remarkable, and so thank you for your
Well, that's
incredible work.
kind of you to say that. But how did you? So fast forward with me on your career a little bit. How did you get to where you did some humanitarian work and you were eventually nominated for a Nobel Prize? I'd like to hear more about that story. That's obviously kind of a huge chapter of your life.
Yeah, that was also a rocky road getting there, interesting enough, because, as physicians, I think it's really important that we're really grounded and really focused on all the best, humanitarian efforts that we can do, but not for self-serving. And what I found with a lot of these charity works out there, that people were grandstanding and it was all about them doing these amazing work. And I was kind of turned off by it, by all of that, especially with the cleft lip areas, because when you go to another country, yeah, these guys are practicing on these poor kids and then leave them alone, and then what?
Then
But
what? Right.
yeah, and then the fact of the matter was that I was here in the Tampa Bay area, and this doctor was begging me to go, please go, please go. And so I was a last minute addition to this team. And the fun fact was, I almost didn't go because they're so disorganized, it's so fragmented. Just it was crazy. We arrive at Miami airport and people forgot supplies, people forgot their passports, and I
Oh
thought, oh
dear.
my gosh, what am I getting myself into, right? And so I identified the most qualified person on the plane going down to El Salvador, and I interviewed that person. I mean, I drilled that person on every single aspect of the expedition and everything else. And by the time we arrived in El Salvador, I pretty much took over control of the entire expedition. So I became that executive leader, which is the most incredible experience I've ever had. Um, and then just managed everything throughout. And people would walk 2, 3 days just to get there, and get a little teary eyed on this one when I remember all these people in this waiting room, and I interviewed every single person. It was like 200 or 300 people. Interviewed every single person to figure out how I'm going to triage them. And I speak Spanish, so that was very helpful. And so I left that experience, Peter, with the most amazing inspiration, aspiration, and determination to do a lot more. And that particular time, we were all nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the work that we're doing, changing people's lives. And this is a time when El Salvador was still, a very violent country. And I remember just driving down to the place, and we had the military, escorts, and it was kind of scary. But yeah, it was incredible, and just really inspired me to do a lot more.
Yeah, well, and I I just want to reflect on that for a minute, Bart. I've been on quite a few of these medical service trips where you go, and I'm not a surgeon per se. When we go to those places, we are usually working to screen a whole bunch of people and find the ones that are going to die if they don't get medical care. And a lot of the times, work we've done in South America and Mexico and in Africa, Kenya, Uganda. Usually, we're trying to work with these organizations that have boots on the ground continuously, because that is one of the challenges, like you said before, is if you show up, if you shine the spotlight on you and say, look at all this great stuff we're doing, and we do it our way. We show up and say, this is our way to do it, and you guys get out of the way. It doesn't work very well. It's so much
Yeah.
better when you work with an organization that has people there continuously on the ground. This one we're going to in Uganda next week. They have it's one of my favorite organizations because it's run by people from Uganda. They are there. They run it. They're there every day. They know the folks that we work with. They're in the villages and the towns, and they know these people like every family. They kind of have them cataloged. They know who needs help. They have kind of a
Right.
little, we wouldn't call it a clinic here, but they call it a clinic there where they can get access to care. And when we go, we'll try to find a whole bunch of people that may need something that day. We can treat them, but every time we go, we find someone, probably lots of people that have something that would go on to kill them if they didn't treat it. And the treatments are relatively simple a lot of the times. And if they need a surgery, we'll arrange for them to get the surgery. And if they have some medical problem that needs a medication, we'll help them arrange that. And then the whole objective is to try to get those folks tied in with the care they need. And then the bigger, the more grand objective beyond that is to try to keep the kids in school. If the kids can if the parents can stay healthy enough to keep sending their children to school, because there's not a school system, so they have to pay for it. If they're healthy enough to keep sending kids to school, the kids pull themselves out of that deep poverty cycle. If you fast forward 20 or 25 years, and it's inspirational to watch what people do when you just give them a little bit of an opportunity.
Yeah, I love what you shared because it is all about respecting other people's cultures, their norms, their
Yeah,
lives in the way that they need to be respected. And that's also a challenge that I found there is that not many people did that. And so it's great that you have that. And then the most important part, as you mentioned, is the sustainability. I mean, you can't just, helicopter in, helicopter out. I mean, you've got to give
right.
them something to stay well. No, that's amazing, Peter. Thanks for
Yeah.
that share.
Well, and when if anybody's listening thinking they want to do international stuff, it's great, but make sure you get involved with an organization that has presence on the ground. And then the other factor in this is you kind of have to do it their way. Like
Yep.
because if I show up and say, well, "Hey, we're doing this the way we do this in the United States," and you all just get lost, number one, it won't work. They won't understand because it's so different than the way they do things. And then number two, as soon as I leave, it'll just the work that we did will be undone. So we try to just
Yep.
adapt and say, okay, what works for you, and let's try to make sure that we get people. I can help identify diseases and treatments and help you with all sorts of stuff, but I can't be here after this short duration of time. So anyway, it sounds like you and I've had similar experiences in
Yeah.
that regard.
Yeah, and interesting enough, one of the surgeries, that we did, there was a girl, a Jehovah's Witness, and she had a condition called neurofibromatosis, and she had
Yeah.
this huge tumor, on her head. And normally I think what would happen is that people would refuse to do that surgery. And I figured, well, she needs this surgery. She won't accept any blood products. She won't accept any anesthesia. And so I literally, millimeter by millimeter, cut this scalp, a huge tumor off of her head. It took me
Mm.
about 8 hours to do that, without anesthesia. I mean, just a bit of local, injection as we went. And of course, I'm limited as to how much I can give at any given time. But after 8 hours, I was able to reconstruct her scalp. And the fun fact is that the next year I heard, I didn't go the next year, but the next year I heard that she was married.
Oh,
And
wow.
so what a change to cause, and something simple like that. And, people would always ask me, why do you do this? And the simple answer, and I know this is exactly the same for you, is because I can. And there's people are needing us.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes to this whole idea, Bart, like the things that drive us as doctors, it has to be that interaction with the person. Like I have a skill set and I have a set of knowledge and you have a need and I can help you with that need. And sometimes when I've done these things outside of the US healthcare system, I found it refreshing because it's just so pure. I'm not worried about anything else besides you have a need and I have a skill and let's try to meet that need in the best way we
Abs
can. And
100%.
I think when you think back to application for medical school and why do you want to be a doctor and all, everybody can think about that. Like, I want to help people. I want to help people out. And then we get kind of stuck in our modern system, which has lots of complexity. And some of that's necessary to have complexity because it has to be sustainable. But it is really nice to go back to like, what's the pure reason you do what you do? And so it
Yep,
sounds, that's pretty cool.
agreed.
Well, tell me a little bit about you're in plastic surgery. You've gone on these service trips. You've worked in there in Florida for a long time. Talk me through a little bit about what your practice is like, and I wondered how you kind of have these two different practice environments you've highlighted. One is in the United States where you're practicing in a healthcare system that's large and broad and complex, and others where you're going to El Salvador, where it's a very different experience. There's no real great system, and it's quite pure, but there's also not a lot of support services, and follow up is challenging, etc.
Well, yeah. So the way I actually became a plastic surgeon was kind of interesting because in medical school, I was good at everything. I loved everything. People loved me as well. And sort of like, well, I can't do everything. And so I started by excluding or eliminating different, specialties. I think my first one was like dermatology and then anesthesia. And then the only thing that was left over was plastic surgery.
Oh,
And so why is that relevant? Well, I love what I do because I'm helping people transform their lives. And so the best part for me in the realm of plastic surgery, whether it's reconstructive or cosmetic, I still think it's still pretty much the same, transforming people's lives. And it's almost like they have a new lease on life. I mean, if it's just helping them with that confidence and then taking the leap of faith to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do, I mean, that's remarkable. But what I realized, Peter, early on in my career, is that, well, I was doing all the work. What about all the rest that these people could do? And so I began focusing on all these things outside of, plastic surgery, outside of conventional medicine, how people could optimize their health. And so that began another journey that I'm very excited about, which is essentially my primary focus today is, how can we redefine the current model of healthcare? How can we make it more accessible, delivery, and affordable as well? And so that's been a journey I've been on, learning all these different things outside of doing my plastic surgery, and where I'm coming today into two things: really helping doctors reimagine the business of medicine and the practice of medicine. What are the tools? Because the reality is, as you and I know, is that there's going to be a shortage of qualified doctors within the next 5, 10 years. And we dramatically need to do something about that. And so that's one primary focus. As I'm, weaning off doing a lot of plastic surgery, I still do the emergency cases and all that. Love doing that. Love helping people. And then in addition to all that, whenever I get a chance, I haven't done any medical work outside of the United States lately. But every year I do go to Guatemala. We help build homes, these kinds of things. And so all these things are very much, on my heart, want to do. And again, assisting other people to do the same.
yeah. Think about that for just a minute. I want to reflect on what you said. There just really aren't that many physicians relative to our population in the United States of America, and probably worldwide. I would say that's largely true. But we've seen a huge shift in our country where the number of doctors who graduate from school, from residency, does it's kind of a mismatch on the size of the population. And then the second part is how long are people staying in practice? Because I think sometimes people get to their early 40s and they say, "Look, I've been able to pay it off, and I want out. I don't want to do this anymore because the system is so challenging to live in, so challenging to function in, that I don't want to stay in it anymore, even though I enjoy the medical part of it." So I guess as you reflected on that, what would you say to doctors who find themselves in that situation, who say, I find myself overwhelmed, burned out, overloaded, no longer enjoying my day to day practice, even though I still love taking care of people. I'm not sure I can live in this system for a prolonged period of time.
Well, and one of the things that you and I both know is that the amount of time and dedication we had to commit to become that doctor in the first place. And in particular, if you become a specialist, all the years with that as well. I mean, my specialty training basically was 9 years,
Right, long time.
um, very long time. And so I was what 37 before I actually, started in my practice. And so depending on how you approach that, I mean, either that's all you do, and for many specialties, that's the case. And so you're not looking outside of the halls of medicine. And so you have no idea what's happening in the world around you. And I think this is the challenge with a lot of the docs out there is they just don't know how to navigate the medical and economical and the political and bureaucratic environments. And so recognizing that, and because I'm privileged because I don't have to rely on insurance and I don't have to rely on all these regulations in that sense, that I have the luxury to have that financial freedom and do things differently. So my purpose then became as to how do I help my colleagues out there reimagine the entire practice of medicine? And fortunately, I've been in the space of personal development, which I didn't even know existed. Funny story by that, with that, by the way, it taught me so many things. And then business acceleration, and the fun fact is that and doctors won't admit this, but we all know that they're lousy business people. And so
We have no formal training in business, really, unless
none
you seek
whatsoever.
it.
And but the worst part is they think they're great at business, right? Because again, we're taught to know everything. We can't make mistakes. We have to be confident. We have to be certain. So when it comes to business, okay, same thing, same rules apply. But the reality is, they're not very good at it. And so that's been my mission over the last 4 or 5 years, really to hone into that opportunity.
No, I love that. That's awesome because it is really. I think as time goes forward, doctors are going to have to discover a way to stay in medicine almost despite the system, despite the chaotic um, system of insurance regulation and things that make it so that it's, those parts of medicine that are really undesirable. We have to figure out a way to stay in medicine and help people despite that. And it sounds like you're tuned into that quite a bit.
I mean, here's an interesting fact. And again, it's unfortunate, how people are getting their information. And this is not our topic today, but the reality is most people think doctors are doing really well. And it's actually not the case. I mean, for certain cases, my plumber makes more money per hour than I do, when I get reimbursed from the insurance companies. It's insane. And they don't have the 17 years of training that I have and the debts and the commitments and the sacrifices and everything else. And so when you look from year 2000 to 2020 and calculate inflation and the reduction of reimbursement per case every single year by anywhere between 7 to 10%, that difference in loss of revenue is about 64%, Peter.
Hmm.
That's what doctors have been, have happened to them over this period of time. And so with all the additional obligations and requirements and regulations and medical records and staffing, a litany of things, yeah, of course they're burnt out. And when you compare somebody who just has technical training and compare it with a doctor and where that revenue match happens, it's pretty much at the age of 55. Only by the age of 55 are doctors able to gain get the revenue that they deserve. And oftentimes now it's not happening.
Well, they talk about with medical school debt, et cetera. A lot of people aren't even back to being broke until you're,
Yep.
well into your 40s. You've maybe, if you pay off your loans really carefully, you're finally back to zero. You no longer owe any debt, and maybe you're back to zero, but you've not really amassed a lot of
Yep.
resources that would help you to put things aside for your life or for retirement. And so, while it's a blessing to be in the medical space, the financial realities are not as rosy as the public think. I think a lot of people, when people ask me like, "Oh, should I become a doctor?" and I say, well, only if you love it. If I want more people to be doctors, somebody's got to take care of me when I'm old. I appreciate
Right.
your interest, and I would strongly encourage you to do it if you love it. But if you got to realize that it's not, if you're trying to do it for some sort of financial thing, you can do a lot better in business or in other things, and with a lot more predictability. And being a doctor is a wonderful career. I highly recommend it to someone who loves science and loves helping people. But if you're doing it because you think, oh, I'll be a multimillionaire when I'm in my 40s, it's unlikely. You have to really play your cards right for that to happen. Most people, like you said, 55 is when you finally can make the cards sort of play out. So
Yep.
you've got yourself financially independent and you're able to do it. But for the vast majority of physicians, that's it takes a long time.
But here's the truth though. If we teach doctors how to rethink the business and practice of medicine, we can change all of that and everybody wins. And that's the mission that I'm on, is how do we actually end up doing that? Because the reality is you're right. I mean, people who love, being doctors and doing the right thing, have that integrity, they're the ones that have to be, in charge in a way. And when we reclaim that autonomy, when we reclaim that ability to be causing the changes, then everything's going to change and everything's going to improve for everyone.
No, that's a good point. So you're talking about just kind of taking a little bit more control of your career, your finances, a lot earlier on in your
Absolutely.
in your career. And well, do you have any? I know that's probably a whole separate topic. But any tips, any place you would point people toward to start learning about that?
Well, first of all, recognizing that we didn't get the formal training, like you said, and begin to looking at programs and courses out there that will absolutely do that. And that's one thing I'm also working on. So that may be a future conversation that we can have, helping doctors, rethink the business of medicine, and just give them the tools. And the tools that I learned through personal development, people like Tony Robbins. Some people don't like this guy, but I've learned so much and it's really radically changed my life. And even more so, this Sean Callaghy from Unblinded Mastery
Hmm.
absolutely has helped me grow my business exponentially. And these are the fun things that are actually available for everyone.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. So one of the things I want to talk about today is, regarding getting paid by insurance. That's one of the
Yep.
challenges we've kind of danced around it a little bit in our conversation. But lots of times doctors find themselves in that same boat. They say, I've shown up in the middle of the night or in a challenging situation, and I've used my skills to help you because I want to help you. It's my commitment to help you, and I want to be there. But I think insurance companies sometimes take advantage of that and say, well, the doctor is kind and has this Hippocratic oath they've taken. They're going to just show up and take care of the patient, but whether or not they get paid, we'll see. Sometimes people
Right.
find themselves in a situation where they've done all this work, and then you go back to the side when it's time to bill for that work, and insurance companies will kind of find various reasons why they say, well, you're out of network, or we're not going to pay for it, or you don't have a contract with our insurance agency or whatever it may be. At the end of it, the doctor doesn't get paid. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experience. I know we've talked a little bit about this, about Callaghy recovery specifically, and I'd like to hear more about what your experience and what you would tell other doctors about that.
Yeah, and just to be fair, I mean, I blame us doctors for not doing something about this earlier on, because when you think of any kind of corporation, what's their primary responsibility is to take care of the shareholders. And they're going to find every sort of way to be able to do that. And that's exactly what's happened. And as physicians, we've allowed that to happen. And it's in all aspects of, in business and bureaucracy and government and all that. So the opportunity very specifically is this, is that, insurance companies have found a way to not pay doctors to the tune of $500 billion every single year,
500
uh,
billion with a B.
500 billion
Wow.
dollars every single year to all these emergency cases that oftentimes surgeons will be doing, ER docs are doing, that are quote unquote out of network. So what that means is that when somebody goes to the emergency room and they have a fall and they need surgery, and they have a insurance policy, but the surgeon on call isn't part of that insurance network, and so technically he's out of network. Now, the patient doesn't have the choice at that moment to decide, which surgeon they'll have, because that's the whole point of having, contracts with insurance companies, and you got a selected number of surgeons you can work with. But this is at 3 o'clock in the morning, and so the surgeon on call is responsible for that. I mean, that's by law; they have to take this case on. So at the end of the day, what's been happening until recently, about 2, 3 years ago, is that the bill that would not be paid out by the insurance company or underpaid, the patients would be balance billed. And so let's say, for example, the bill is $20,000, which is kind of an average cost for these emergency cases. Sometimes they're a lot more depending on the severity. And the insurance company would say pay 2,000, then suddenly the patient would get a bill for $18,000.
Right, which is they can't. No patient is going to be able to just say, "I'll write a check
No,
for $18,000."
no, exactly. And so the brilliant thing that happened in Congress and Senate was that they came up with a No Surprise Act, which means that in all of these cases, the patients are no longer billed by either the institutions or the doctors, and so that protected them. And so now what that left the doctors with is a situation that insurance companies would severely underpay the surgeons, and then pretty much the surgeons had no recourse that they were aware of to actually collect what was rightfully theirs. And so, said differently, let's say that $20,000 case that doctor performed, insurance company pays maybe $2,000 or maybe just $1,500, and then the doctors had no idea how to recover the remainder. And so what's great is that the Caligari recovery firm, they've been in this business for the last 25 years, more in the sense of helping doctors recover the monies from insurance companies. So they've been in this space. They have a lot of experience. And when this whole No Surprise Act came to be, they're very much in the front line to be able to help doctors recover that money. Because where it currently stands, is to keep it very simple, is simply this, is that when a surgeon performs a case and they receive an underpayment, let's say 10% of what's owed to them, it now becomes a legal matter according to the act. And so with a recovery firm, they can take this information and go to an arbiter, and then the arbiter will then, a federal IDR, for independent dispute resolution arbiters, and then the arbiter will decide what's fair and equitable. They will decide what the doctor then deserves. And so it's a process that is very active right now. But most doctors just don't have an idea about it. Their administrators don't know about it. The billers don't know about it. And if anybody is doing it, it's quite likely to be suboptimal, because the firm that we work with, they're the leaders in the filing throughout the country. I mean, they're doing more files in, say, states like Texas and California.
And my understanding is you have to file within 30 days, or it's a very narrow, tight time window. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the whole process is technically stacked against the docs. What I love about the integrity and the visionary aspect of this company is they're actually working closely with Congress and the Senate to make some changes with that as well. But as you said, I mean, there's a 30-day window. The clock starts, at the moment that the doctor receives the bill, and at 30 days, there's a 4-day window. If you submit the claim a day before, or you submit the claim a day after that window, you're done. You cannot recover anything. And not exactly sure the logic behind that. And then once you submitted that, then more clocks start in. And so the timelines are very, very strict. And so the reality is, and for all those doctors listening out there, the reality is that most doctors, most administrators think it's a medical issue. And so they try the appeals, they bypass that window, they can never, ever recover that money ever again. And so finding a recovery firm that has the integrity to be able to do this in the proper way, that has the experience and the data to get the best results, I would say there's none other than the Caligari Recovery Firm.
Yeah, so Caligari Recovery, the idea is if you're a a physician who does these, and you're getting patients who their insurance just won't cover it, and yet
Right.
you're on the hook. You must show up by contract with your hospital, and you're there doing the procedure, helping somebody. And if you find yourself in this situation pretty routinely, you pretty much need to have a group like Caligie Recovery already on your team,
Yep.
already saying, look, I plan on this. Let's just plan instead of waiting for it to be a disaster. Let's just plan on it. We know that's going to happen routinely. We're going to get some of these, and then you file that information to Caligie Recovery, and then they take care of it because they can help meet those stringent timelines so that you can actually recover. How successful has it been for you? I mean, are they able to recover most of the things that they go after when they approach it through the proper timeline?
Yeah, so 25 years, 27, 28 years of experience, they've recovered close to I'm not 9 billion, $1 billion through this entire process of working with insurance companies. There's a relevant thing that doctors need to think about because most doctors just want to be in denial. I mean, I'm just being really transparent and honest. They don't want to think about this. Their team doesn't want to think about this. They just rather just write it off. But when you think about the amount of money that's left on the table that's rightfully theirs, that could help boost their business, and if anything, give it back to charities, give it back to the community. I mean, is insane. I mean, $500 billion every single year is what's currently available. And so the importance of that is that, doctors are scared. It's, how it's going to affect their reputation. They're focused on, well, maybe I'm greedy. No, this is what's rightfully yours. And the best part of all this, Peter, there's no risk for the doctor. There's no upfront monies. It's all about contingencies. So they're recovering money, which is predominantly 8 to 10 to 12 times as much as what they're recovering right now through this process. It's with the highest integrity, the highest transparency, and it makes no sense not to consider it. So if a doctor is performing any kind of emergency cases out of network, that's just a shoo-in. I mean, you got to connect with, your platform, Peter, because I know there's a link that they can connect with and figure out, what the next step is. They'll talk to a representative, a very fluid and seamless process, no risk, no extra burden. In fact, it reduces the burden for the office because now they don't have to deal with all the appeals that they were doing, previously. So it's insane not to be part of this, Peter. And I hope those listening recognize that. And again, it's just a quick phone call, 30 minutes with one of our representatives, figure out what is right for yours, and it'll absolutely change their lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where long term, we can hope that the system will make changes so that we don't put people in this situation. Because I've said it before on this podcast, and you and I talked about this before we hit record. I want to leave medicine better than I found it. And
Yep.
one of the big challenges right now is we've created this environment where doctors are kind of they're kind of, what do you say, almost victimized a little bit. You say like, well, those mean doctors, see, they're trying to bill you for more than your insurance is willing to pay, so we'll put the onus on them. We'll make them the bad guys, or the hospital doesn't have to pay the difference. And a lot of people find themselves, as physicians, find themselves saying like, well, I'm just doing this service basically for free, or we're writing off 90% of the cost, and you can't really do it that way. And the amount that it costs to perform that procedure or do whatever medical thing is required, there's a fixed cost to doing that because you have OR time, you've got staff, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And you certainly wouldn't ask another professional if you went to your electrician or your plumber or whatever and said, sorry, my insurance company says I have to give myself a 90% discount on your services. Sorry, you don't get paid. Or like you said, you go to the grocery
Yep.
store and load up your cart, ring you up for $500, and you say, sorry, I'm only going to pay you $50 for this. My credit card company says I can't pay you anymore.
And understand this, and I think this is, escapes most people and even us doctors as well, is that, we are so hyper trained. A lot of us have become super specialists, not like you though, because what you're doing is great. You're addressing your rural communities, which we absolutely need. But the reality is that, you need to be hyper focused on your skill set. And you just don't have the time and the bandwidth to take care of all the other things. One of which is, the financial, well-being, financial health of your business. And when now you have all these other elements, the burdens. Number one, are you getting paid? Number two, staffing that's harder these days. Number three, all these administrative things and legislative things and regulations and this and things that are called outmoding with technology changing. And now every 2, 3 years you have to upgrade and all this other training. So there is so much. And the biggest one, the financial strain makes it a lot harder because once you have the financial freedom, then you're going to be able to function as the best possible doctor you can absolutely be, because then everything else is going to basically take care of itself. And that's the game that we're playing. And again, I think it's important for doctors, number one, to realize because they've been trained to deal with so much, right? I mean, you know how medical school was in residency. I mean, I remember times when I was in the operating room 36 hours in a row,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
I had like 1 hour sleep between, let's say, 4 and 5 a.m. But that's the kind of training. And so we tolerate a lot and we've accepted a lot because of the goodness of our heart, but it's not sustainable. And I think that's the key thing that we need to look at. And once we have that financial freedom, right, to have a sustainable business, we can then pick and choose where we're best at, take care of those things. And guess what? The community wealth, health will be so much better. And that's the name that's the game that we're playing right now.
Yeah, I've just I love what you just said, Bart. I just want to reflect on that for a minute. I think that one of the most important things that we can all do is look at our financial house and put it in order. I mean, that's so important because if you have played your financial cards right, live conservatively in those early years after residency, invest wisely, don't take risky investments, and then of course get paid for what you do. Use Calgary Recovery to help you out with if you're in that situation. If you do those things, you can find yourself financially independent, and then you can say, well, this is the part of medicine where I feel like I make the biggest difference. And I'm not doing this because I have golden handcuffs. I'm not up to my eyeballs in debt. I'm doing this because I want to give back, because I want to help. And then you can also modify your business to be able to do the things that make the biggest impact on your community and or on the world or whatever area you want to focus on. There's the world is yours once you have kind of figured out that financial game.
Yeah, totally. And just let's be honest. I mean, we're in crisis mode right now. I mean, we're, lacking enough doctors. And certainly by 2030, 2034, the prediction is, we won't have, we'll be short of 100,000 doctors.
But that's not very
And
far down the road.
no, it's not.
That's crazy to think about. Well, and I would want to, I would want listeners on this podcast to have those tools, to have the perspective. We talked, your journey is awesome, Bart. Like we've talked about the desire to become a doctor and make this difference and talk to people and help. And then just the financial realities of it is you have to be able to play that financial game so that you can continue to give back. And it sounds like you've found a way to do it, and you're still doing it. Now you're still in practice and still helping people out, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's awesome because fun fact, by the way, I was 6 months into medical school and I realized, you know what, I don't like doctors, and I'm never going to marry one, and I'm never going to marry anybody in healthcare. And now I'm here, championing their cause. And because the reality is that having a healthy community changes everything. It affects all the disparities and all the frustrations and all these other things that we are faced constantly. If we can just help people with their health, everything's going to change. And that's been my mission, and excited to be part of it.
It's awesome. Well, we tell people all the time as doctors, like if your health isn't good, nothing else matters, and it's true. Like people talk about so many things that matter, and I've been a patient a lot these last couple of years, and I've just thought so much about the doctors who have helped me, and it's not just theoretical, like, oh yeah, I need a good doctor. Like just from the very bottom of my heart, I just can't say enough good for the people who have used their time and energy and that base of knowledge to help me through my troubles. And it's you want to be able to show up to your doctor and say, this is a person who cares about me, wants me to have an excellent outcome, is just as invested in the outcome as I am, and you can't get that unless your doctor is well rested and is motivated and wants to be there and wants to help and doesn't feel like they're just punching the clock for somebody else. And so all this financial stuff, I think, actually really does make a difference on the level of care that we can do and the motivation for people to stay in medicine, keep practicing and doing the things that they are good at.
No, 100%. And that's, real for anyone in any profession. When you've got that financial security, it gives you that comfort level to do what you know is right. People will violate their values, they'll violate their beliefs, to satisfy their needs. And one of which, is certainty. Certainty that, you're going to be able to pay the bills next month. Certainty that, your legacy is going to be in place. And all of that revolves around our finances. And again, having the tools and resources for this whole medical recovery for many of those doctors out there. But also this firm, has the opportunity to help doctors on other issues when it comes to insurance. And so again, I mean, I fault the doctors, as good-willed and good-natured as they are. They just strictly focus on what they're really good at and just lost sight of all the other aspects of what makes a business thrive. And so it's time for us just to take control. I'm not knocking the system. I'm not knocking anything else. I'm just knocking us docs. Hey, we can do this. Let's work together. And with people like you, Peter, who are enlightening us with, opportunities, that's what's going to make the real difference.
I think so. Like what I want this episode to go down is just, obviously we're highlighting Calgary recovery today, but as one of those tools. We talk about a lot of tools on the podcast, but just in general as doctors, these are the tools that allow you to stay in practice. So in the show notes, I'll include a link for Calgary recovery and talk about how you can access that resource, because it's likely that if you're someone that takes call and does procedures in the middle of the night, you're going to find yourself needing Calgary recovery. So I think that's a great one to highlight today. I do want to ask what comes next for Dr. Bart Rademaker. You've done so many cool things in your life. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm launching a company at the end of this year. It's just a teaser. And so I hope to get on your show maybe in 6 months when I'm ready to launch it. It's super fun. And it's all about making it a lot easier for people to access the health that they can have. And it's just a departure. It's not a challenge to the current system, but it's just giving people more choices. And I think it was Jay Leno who said this, that when you have more choices, you can be happier. And I think he was referring to the fact that he was like super wealthy.
He
And
was.
so
He
when
is.
you're super wealthy, you got more choice. And in the world of neurolinguistic programming, we know that that system that's most flexible wins. And so it really is all about giving people flexibility, opportunities. But also one thing that's really dear in my heart, and this stemmed from my experience in El Salvador, when I saw that there was such a need to help people with opportunities to contribute beyond themselves. There's two things that qualify as what makes us happiest. One is growth, one is contribution. But what I found when I was looking at doing these charity expeditions to other countries, I found that many of these organizations had restrictions, so religious restrictions, professional restrictions, and all that kind of stuff. When we can contribute beyond ourselves, it makes a difference. And so I established a foundation then called Wellbe Medical Frontiers to satisfy that need. And so hopefully within the next 3-4 years, I will reignite that and really giving people the opportunity to go to different countries. And exactly what you said, when people are on the ground, when the infrastructure is there, and then I can plug in people into that have otherwise no experience, but really want to help the world, then that'll be magical.
Awesome. Well, and I think all that stuff will do just what we talked about before. You'll leave medicine better than you found it, Bart. This is really inspirational, and I've loved catching up with you. And I hope we stay in touch. I would like to hear more about the next step on your journey, like you say, in a few months as you keep going forward on this.
No, absolutely. And again, you're a champion for us. You're the voice for us. So much is needed for that in so many different levels. I mean, you're showcasing what people are doing remarkably, for our communities, doing things differently. It gives us that inspiration to stay the course, not to be disillusioned by the system, and knowing that we're better than that. And it's with anything. I mean, we got the agency within us, and you're reminding us of that.
Thank you so much, Bart. Keep in touch. We'll talk to you later.
Absolutely.
I want to emphasize the importance of what we've spoken about today. Doctors train for years to gain the skills necessary to be able to perform at a high level, to be able to perform the very best for patients who've entrusted them with their care. And sometimes, despite our best efforts, patients receive the excellent care, but doctors are not being paid for those services. If you are one of those doctors who finds yourself in a situation where you're not being paid for the services that you've rendered because of insurance confusion, it's very important to receive proper representation so that you can be paid for the services you've performed. You can visit calagayrecovery.com/doctors making a difference. That's spelled CALLAGY recovery.com/doctors-making-a-difference. I encourage you to go there today and visit and find out what you can do to be paid properly for the things that you've done. Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.